Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the floating head of SimonTV. Wonderful that you could join me after my hiatus. I haven't been online for a couple of weeks. It is fantastic to be back in the chair here with all of you doing this. Tonight we are going out live on X, YouTube, Instagram, Substack, Rumble, Twitch, the Fediverse with Owncast, and of course our dear friends at Resonate Radio in Nokia, Finland. Hello, Finland from Auckland in New Zealand. I see some of the locals have joined us. Good evening. Nice to see you. Matua Kahurangi is here. Hello. Shelley the Kiwi is here. Good evening. Good evening. My dear old friend, Carleen Woolley is here. My other dear old friend, PLJ, is doing a little bit of moderation. Dagsy's here as well. Fantastic. Nice to see you, young man. And Excalibur is coming in from London. Wonderful. I'm looking forward to catching up with Excalibur and hearing what went on overnight with the Unite the Kingdom demonstration in London. It did appear to be a big one. But before we get into all of that, this has been a momentous week, and I do want to take a moment and extend my heartfelt condolences to everyone who cared about Charlie, to his family, to his friends, to his colleagues. It is an absolute tragedy that young man lost his life, and my heart goes out to him and those who cared about him, as I'm sure all of yours does too. We will be talking more about that later. But before we do, I have a fascinating guest to introduce to you. His name is Lester Bryant. He's an independent candidate running for the Waitemata ward here in Auckland Central's local body elections. Good evening, Mr. Bryant. How the devil are you?
I'm good. How are you, Simon?
Better now I'm speaking with you. Now, tell us, where do you come from? What's your background? What's your story?
Oh, I was born in the 50s in the lower part of Taranaki and grew up there. You can imagine a small rural town in New Zealand, quite boring in those days. But by the time I got into my teenage years, Taranaki had become the Texas of New Zealand. So it became a very exciting place to start your career and work your way through every job opportunity you could find.
Oh, fantastic. And what is your academic background?
Mainly trade. I've got this strange... I've got steam tickets, boiler tickets, water treatment plant tickets. I used to commission plants, so petrochemical plants and power stations. And I was a commissioning engineer. So it's not like an engineer where you go to university. It's an engineer where they do on-site training. Still very highly skilled, still very well educated. And that was the beginning of it. But after that, probably in my mid-30s, I started in business, and I've been in business ever since. So business became my trade, really.
Okay, fantastic. So most of your life, you've been, how would you say, surfing the ups and downs of business life in New Zealand. Have you resided in any other countries, or has New Zealand been the focus for you?
No, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK. But by far the longest was New Zealand, and the longest in that has been Auckland. So, yeah.
Okay, all right. And you're standing now for local body elections as a councillor. Good for you. I think that is tremendous. Do you have any political background experience before standing yourself this time?
No, this is the first time. Encouraged by friends who think I've got a lot to say and a lot of opinions. So. And I in a way, I think I might be suited to politics or be a political animal. I absorb an awful lot of information and read a lot on the topic. It'll be interesting to see what people think of some of the opinions that I've formed.
Okay, fantastic. And you know what it's like for local body elections? There is... it's almost a little bit arm's length from the national party political structure. But that is less true in Auckland, where you have an awful lot of the party machineries of parties like the Greens, like Labour, and to a degree National with citizens and ratepayers paying attention and having an influence on the elections here. Now, a couple of questions I have to you about that. The first one is, what is it like being an independent candidate against up against some of that sort of party machinery? And secondly, were you approached at all by any of those sort of conglomerates to represent one of their factions?
No, and the short answer, mainly because I'm an unknown. I haven't been going around the traps, although I've been involved with the National Party a couple of times, helping down in Christchurch. I've never really been a part of the machinery. I wonder if I'll be approached now. I don't know, but I don't see it as the reason to run or not to run for Auckland City Council. I'm interested. I've seen in the different meetings we've had the different lobby groups and how they operate. I'm really surprised at the lack of quality of some and the really high level of quality in some of the others. Some are very polished performers and they come well prepared. Others just wing it. And I wonder really, are they taking the meeting seriously? Which makes me wonder, are the meetings a serious option for you to go and have a look at? And will people base their votes on those meetings, or are they purely turning up just so they can have a bitch about their pet topic? So, yeah.
Well, I think it is. It's decreasing returns. You know, like for those, a whole bunch of the people who do vote in these elections simply will never attend one of those candidate debates. Right? What they'll do is they'll look at a candidate's website, they receive their voting papers in the mail, and pretty much they just kind of, to a degree, make a guesswork. It seems to me that that having a solid online presence and being involved and, kind of communicating with the prospective electorate in that manner is a lot more useful. The other thing I do note is at these candidates' debates and things like that, you often get members of the crowd, particularly those that are associated with the far left, the trade unions, the Green Party and the Labour Party. And there are people in the audience who are there explicitly looking, they've been instructed and they're arranged to try and trip up opposing candidates, to ask difficult questions, to be disruptive and so on. And have you experienced any of that?
Patently obvious that goes on, patently. And been heckled, managed to get applause against the hecklers by debating back off the stage. Absolutely loved one of the meetings I was at. Sarah Trotman was racking up everybody, both promoting speakers on stage and running down others. I thought it was wonderful. And then a couple of times there's been interactions between the candidates themselves that have been heated, and I think people enjoy it. And it is illuminating. You see a lot more. When someone's put on the spot and they have to respond quickly, you learn an awful lot about them. I wish that in some of these meetings, which actually when we talk about the meetings, most of them are set up by special interest groups. So those special interest groups are channeling you towards questions and responses that they want to hear, which almost obliges you to give them what they want to hear so you don't get eliminated in their follow-up media. I took a very different approach, and I think that's why I've been liked at some of the meetings. I tend to be contradict or just elaborate more on the questions. I don't like the 90-second sound bites some of them give you just to reply. It doesn't work. But you're right, yes, they're full of lobbyists, and those people are there to trip you up. But I think it's a case of being able to debate. Really, at the end of the day, you've got to be able to debate, and to debate, you've got to do it quickly. So that's all you've got going for you.
Well, I think that's right. I think it is a wonderful skill. And I do think that, in the contest of ideas, it is something that is ever more just being lost in our discourse. We're seeing this from our court system, and we're certainly seeing it in Parliament. Once upon a time, it used to be the case that if someone straight up misled Parliament, dissembled, or outright lied, that was a huge deal. Now It's not. Now you can have Rawiti, half-witty, speak in Parliament about things like genocide. You can have a Chloe Swarbrick describe a violent riot as a peaceful demonstration, and there are no consequences for that. And this is, to a large part of the reason for this, is that the Enlightenment principles of the open marketplace of ideas and rationalism and logic and reason and critical thinking and debate has been replaced by the leftists who just outright reject those principles by supplanting them with concepts like lived experience and what is true for you is true for you. And I think it is important that certainly for the voting public, someone like me, to hear two people speak to an issue and see which one is the one that sounds most sensible to me. Now, where would you fit yourself on the ideological spectrum? How would you describe yourself in that regard?
In some parts, I would say for the 50-year-old and 50 years of age and older, I'm very much right. But I have quite a strong heart for the young ones, which you'll understand, I think, as I elaborate some of my ideas later. I think the younger people today are getting a hard road, and it's not fair. And to be honest, the older of us have to do something about it to correct it before it becomes an issue that both them and us don't like. And in respect to that, I think we've got to have some left-leaning approaches to help them and to move them forward. So.
Left-leaning approaches economically or socially?
Mainly economic.
Okay, so could you give me an example of that?
Okay. I don't know if you're aware of it, but 70% of New Zealand's healthcare goes to the over 75-year-olds. When I started work, there were 7 wage earners for every superannuitant. Now there's barely 2. So an awful lot of money that's been spent on people, the baby boomers and the older baby boomers. And that money has only been arrived at by borrowing, which the future generations have to pay. So they've now found themselves in a position where they've got a heavy student loan. They are trying to get enough KiwiSaver together for their own retirement that when they get to superannuation, it probably won't be there. They can barely afford a house to couple up or to get married and have kids, right? And it's just a tragedy. The things that we took for granted aren't there. So that economic cycle that revolves around is unmaintainable. It's just simply going to collapse. We can't keep it up. So we've got to take quite a pragmatic approach as the older ones who hold the wealth and do something that's the least painful to filter that wealth down to them before it's too late. So that's your
approach to that is redistributive as opposed to, say, increasing productivity broadly across the economy.
No, both. The problem with productivity equations, it relies on population growth. And we're in a cycle where that's going, we're in negative population growth and we're going down rapidly. So that's not an option.
Okay. And how have you found the campaign so far as you're progressing through it? It's your first time doing it. I'm guessing it's you and a few volunteers, those who think that you would be good helping you out here and there. How have you found the process of it?
Well, first of all, I want to thank some of those, when I say volunteers, the people that have come up and openly supported me. There's a number of them, Bobby, Rock the Vote, people like that, and left and right. They've just come up and said, hey, I like your message, I like what you're saying. How have I found it? For me personally, I've probably found something I'm natural at, to be honest. I've wondered for years if I ever went for some public office, what would it be like and would I rise to the occasion? And at this point in time, Simon, I'll say that I'm enjoying it. I don't find any of it difficult. And I like the challenge and I love the occasional contest of ideas. It really is very encouraging. I've been watching a lot of stuff that revolves around council. I don't know if you know it, but on YouTube you can watch council meetings and they've had them recorded. And I've just been analysing the people that speak there because I want a gauge of what they're like. In the same way that a number of us would watch Parliament, you get the same kind of impact. And it's interesting to see the characters, not their sound bites, but their real character on screen and how they consider things. In most cases, genuine, good-hearted people. And in some of the cases, absolutely absence of any ideas. I would hazard to say that a number of them are as deep as a teaspoon. So, and that's the sad part.
Well, this is the perception that most Aucklanders have, is that our council is utterly dysfunctional. It's completely wasteful. We have these CCOs that are corrupt, that waste money. with all sorts of backhanders going on at Auckland Transport, all that sort of stuff that people know about, people gossip about, and nothing seems to be done about it. The hope, I think, was that Mayor Wayne Brown would come in and clean some of that stuff up. I think it would be fair to say that he probably has made some progress in that regard, but the machinery of the City Council still does seem to be absolutely dysfunctional. Now, that is a broadly held opinion by many people. Many people are disappointed also that we were promised that the super city would lead to economies of scale and so on and so forth, and nothing like that has happened. What we have instead is huge rises in rate bills. So given that sort of a background, what is your approach to rectifying some of these issues, and what do you think you can achieve as a councillor if you are elected?
Achieving things as a councillor, I'm going to leave as a question mark. I think I have to get there to understand it and understand the machinery. But identifying the problems, I prefer to do it numerically. When the Super City Council was created, it had 7,200 employees, and today it has 12,800. So that's a 77% increase in staff when we've had only a population increase of 19%. Also, on top of that, they've had a budget back in 2011 of $3 billion, and now I see two published figures. One's $8 billion, the other's $9.1 billion. So that's a 266% increase in rates at a time when we've only had 34% increase in accumulated inflation. So it's patently obvious that the Auckland City Council is a monopoly, a beast that just can't seem to be turned around. And it's causing a lot of headaches, not the least economic, for Auckland City. If you watch the council meetings, you'll see, I would say, almost a council that concedes that it's got very little control over the council staff, that the council itself is a machine that they have no real direct control over. That Wayne Brown now getting AT was just a part of trying to get that under control. We need more intervention. Most people probably think that the councillors have control of the council. They don't. All they can do is scrutinise supply budgets and scrutinise the managers involved. And I guess if I was to say, what do I think the issue is there? It appears to me that it's the managers. So let me just raise a point. The managers get higher pay or pay increases by having more staff. That's just a fundamental part of being a manager. Currently, on average, they get about $13,500 per staff member they have. So if I find issues that need more staff in council and I get more staff, I automatically get more pay.
Right, so it's encouraging to do that, but you've hit on a point there, right, which is the democratic accountability, and we see this in local government across the board, where you have CEOs who effectively see their role as plenipotentiaries, who just kind of do whatever they do, and to a degree, they just insulate the bureaucracy of council from the elected officials, and we've seen this in places where elected councils have not been provided with councillors have not been provided with information from inside the councils that they represent because the bureaucracy doesn't think it's in their interests to receive it. So I think someone like you, who is a numbers guy, who looks to apply a sort of a quantitative and qualitative analysis over that sort of thing, is someone who is well placed to be asking those sort of questions, like looking at the budget and saying, well, hang on a second here, these numbers don't add up. But before we explore that further, I do need to speak to some of the people who have been lodging comments in the chat. Carl Starr here is on YouTube. I will vote for whoever will cut spending. Carl Starr, I thoroughly concur with you. I would also be looking for wise spending. I want to see a little bit less spending on things like in Wokington City Council. You know, they were spending an awful lot of money on things like rainbow pedestrian crossings, on stuff like sex courses for transvestites, that sort of stuff. I don't think, you know, that I think there is a qualitative argument as well as a quantitative one. PLJ says, I've read that. PLJ says, Lester, this is a question for you. How do you see Wayne Brown's performance? That's a good question.
I would say he's a frustrated man. I've watched some of the ways he handles meeting and the way he tries to question. Unfortunately, if you see the managers on the other side, you start to realise they're probably cleverer than most of the councillors. And no one there knows what questions to ask them to pin the jelly to the wall. No one's got a clue. So I see budgets presented, but they're not final budgets and they're estimates. And then I see questions on previous estimates, but then they're justifying an increase. And then they get asked questions like, so how do we know that's the final increase? And they have a very diplomatic answer for that, which means we don't. And then I see them going, is this, what's the timeline? We keep asking you for when it's finished, and they can't get a direct answer. What they lack at that council level is skills. So I come from a project management and quantity surveying background. That's been the last 20-something years for me. And we have very formal processes to make sure budgets are correct, that they are final, contracts are final, and that in a project management world, we know exactly what's going to happen and when. But the councillors don't know what questions to ask, and this is part of the problem. They don't know to ask for a job acceleration program. They don't know to ask them for a project management format they can read and interpret with the resourcing in behind. They don't know any of that. So the council managers get the opportunity to just keep smoke in the mirror. They do it all the time. So I think really we need just a different calibre of people, probably at political and local body politics, people that can scrutinise numbers, in particular scrutinise budgets, as in, we've got a project here, we've got a cost budget. Does this cost budget actually make sense? Is it, or are we going to get to the end of it and have a blowout in budget like, the centre rail? What is it? $1.5 billion budget's now $6 billion, and it's twice the time to build. That is lunacy.
It is, but you have that latitude in the public sector, but you also do in terms of the skills of the personnel. Like people of your age, of my age, we get ever increasingly involved in governance roles, right? And when we're sitting on boards and so on, they look for a particular skill set. So the standard sort of skill set that a well-designed board is, they have someone from an accountancy background. That's always very, very useful. Someone from a legal background, someone from perhaps human resources background, though I particularly don't have a lot of faith in that skill set. And where I get called in a lot is for a technology background. And then you get a sort of a reasonable skill set of people who can actually ask the right questions. And I see this all the time in my professional life, where you see these. It's very easy to bamboozle a decision-making board if there's no one who has the skill set to ask the right questions, as you mentioned. There are a few more questions here. Embrace Empathy is here. Good evening. Chloe Sprawbrook stated on some podcast that 4 years their movement has been installing and mobilizing their people into places of power, councils, churches, academia, etc., etc. Yeah, Embrace Empathy. That is Deutschke's Gramscian long march through the institution. The left have been doing that absolutely everywhere. Socialite is here. Good evening, young man. And he asks, I'll vote for whoever will cut out the co-governance woo-woo. What do you reckon about that, Lester?
Well, I don't like the co-governance idea. I'm one of the people that sees all New Zealanders as equal. I don't know if most people know, but we've already got institutions within council that are effectively doing that. So why we need even more of it I don't even know why they're lobbying for that, apart from there's a bigger agenda, and I think we should be suspicious. One little foot in the door, what does it ultimately lead to? So right now, I'm very suspicious of it, and I don't like it.
Fair enough. All right, Angela Marino is here on YouTube. Good evening, Ms. Marino. I have heard this from councils that they can't speak. They can't speak. Is this a true? Councils or councillors? Socialite says, Wayne Brown is marvellous. NZ needs clones of him in every council. Socialite, he strikes me as being a pretty pragmatic sort of a dude. I don't think that I think that he will win again, but I think, as Lester says, he does face a bit of an uphill battle. He also hasn't done a lot of the glad handing that is expected from a mayor, and I'm not necessarily certain that that is a bad thing. My friend Murray, who I bumped into today, made this point that Wayne Brown is not a guy that you see showing up at the festivals and kissing babies and shaking hands and that sort of stuff. So that people have a little bit of a sort of a standoffish perception of the man, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. And certainly he's done pretty well. Like, the problem we've got with the super city is block voting from particularly South Auckland, but also West Auckland, which means that we tend to have a preponderance of left-wing incompetence on the council and as mayor. A good example is that dude Len Brown. Anyone remember him? I mean, that guy was just an absolute disaster. And the reason for it is that for the NPCs who live in those kind of left-wing electorates, it's very easy for the Labour Party to come along and offer them, a bucket of KFC to vote for their candidate. So in that regard, I think Wayne Brown is very much a bit of an antidote. DK Spiracy is here, coming in from Christchurch. Hello there. You'll probably find a whole bunch of people in the chat. Why would that much money need to be spent on such a minority to the detriment of the majority? In what regard? You've lost me there a little bit, chat. Excalibur says the long march through the institutions, exactly right. That's a Rudy Deutschke, but it is Gramscian. It's Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci's approach to achieving socialist revolution in Western societies as an antidote to the armed revolution that was proposed by Trotsky 20 years before Gramsci was writing these ideas in an Italian prison cell. Socialite says Masterton District Council increases staff from around 70 to 135 in 6 years. MDC currently has 2 ex-council staff standing for election. Neither is willing to answer questions in writing in public. Well, Socialite, how in the hell is that in any way democratic? Excalibur says they're not there for the likes of you and me, and I think that is absolutely true. These people are career bureaucrats, and I think that one of the things that I look for from a councillor, and I'm certainly looking at you here, Lester, is to crack the whip a little bit and be saying, look, we need. If it can't be measured, it can't be managed. Here are the KPIs. Here are the performance targets. These are the numbers you need to reach. And if you don't, there are going to be consequences and people are going to lose their jobs. Do you feel as a councillor that you have the appetite for that sort of approach to relations with the bureaucracy? And do you think it's even possible to have that sort of a relationship?
I've pondered this quite a bit. I'm going to discuss a bit of a plan that I have. One of the issues we've got, Auckland City Council is now the 3rd biggest employer in New Zealand, and it's nearly the biggest. It's definitely the biggest employer in Auckland. And the managers that you've got there, they are the brains trust of that council. There's no doubt. They're smarter than the council is, and they're the brains trust of the council. The problem we've had is we've given them the wrong motivations. I would propose that we find a way to motivate them to bring in the efficiency. In other words, find ways to motivate them to get even more pay, feed the greed, so that they make the changes that are necessary. I don't think we can go, look, you guys are out and we've got a new bunch of guys in. I think that would be very counterproductive. Sometimes you've just got to work with what you've got and let it get what it wants to get the end result. I would not be surprised if and someone mentioned lowering rates. I truly believe, actually, I've done some numbers. I believe that 5 to 8 years from now, we could chop out about 1/3 of our rates. We would have lower rates. But we need to instigate a common plan to make that occur.
Okay. Have you published these figures somewhere for us to review?
No, I haven't. But
no. Okay.
I'll put them up in the Facebook channel or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, just on that, you're on Facebook and Instagram. This is your major channel for interacting with the electors and the electorate.
Yeah, Facebook's been my main one that I've been putting material on. I'm leaving a flurry of things for the last 2 weeks, just for your reference. So you'll find interesting material on there. And there's some what I consider hot topics even beyond this. But certainly when it comes down to what would you do strategically, to lower the cost of the council. Yeah, I'm going to leave that for the last 2 weeks.
Okay, so Leicester Auckland, I think, is your Facebook handle, your Instagram handle. That is where people should go to hear more about your policies.
Yes, Simon. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, look, I'm going to bring up your book in a moment so that people are aware that you did this. I've not read your book, but it does certainly sound interesting. It certainly sounds very autobiographical. Let me bring up a link to it, and perhaps you can tell us what the story is about it.
Okay. I never thought I'd do this with council, but if people got an interest. When I wrote that book, I'd been through my first business failure. But it was a composite set of tragedies. A lot of people don't realise how painful a business failure is, both at a business level and an emotional level, and a whole lot of issues that creep in with it. And you don't intend for your business to fail. So as a bit of background, I had a quantity surveying business in Christchurch. We had a number of employees. We had quite a big cash flow for the business, but in the latter days, we were bleeding money and dramatically, and we had to maintain the staff levels because of the legal necessity of the clients we were working for. In the middle of that, I had a wife who had a stroke, and I had a son who got scoliosis. For the people who don't know, he got acute scoliosis, a really twisted spine. And I had been through 2 other recessions and survived, but this particular battle I went through, I lost it, to be honest, Simon. I really struggled, and at a personal level, and I couldn't think at work. I've always been a survivor, but in that situation, I just didn't manage to hold it together. So I realised at some point in time that I needed to do something about not hurting people, because if you go too far with a business that's insolvent, you can end up not being able to pay people out. And I made the decision to honour all my secured creditors and all the debtors.
Which is the honourable thing to do.
Correct.
So, well, it certainly sounds cathartic because, as you say, particularly for males, struggling with your business and going out of business is a really big deal. All right, it's particularly for males. There's psychological harm there, but it is something that people can recover from. And what it reminded me when I heard about the subject of your book, I'm old enough to remember when there was massive changes in the 1970s and the 1980s to employment law in the United Kingdom, and you would hear stories about these guys who were things like they were city bankers or they were senior civil servants who expected to have a job for life and were suddenly made redundant and were too ashamed to actually tell their wives. So they were, for months and years, getting dressed into a 3-piece suit, packing their lunches and their briefcases and going and sitting in the park all day because they were too ashamed to face the fact that they were going out of business. I don't think that there is that sort of stigma anymore, but I do think that, people that are going through the pressures of all of that sort of stuff, because as you say, it leaks over into your personal life, might find some value in that. Was that kind of I'm guessing here, but is that sort of the purpose of this book?
Well, let me explain it a bit more. I not only wrote my story, I interviewed 6 other people I'd known who had also gone bust. And I got their stories about what the background was and what were the dominoes falling at what points in time, what decisions they regretted making. Unfortunately, when you're in that process, there's certain decisions you have to make, or you have to make a decision. You're not quite sure on the outcome, but you just have to make a decision. And that can be fatal to the business or it can keep it going. Typically, there's personal loss. So many of the people I talked to lost the family home, had to move the schools out of private, move the kids out of private schools. Couple lost their marriages. The heartache, the stress. One of them really sad. There was 3 suicides involved in the process, and it was just tragic. So you don't. Most people think, oh, it's like another day. Close the door. I go start another business. yeah, I'll get over it. It's not like that at all. It's an extremely stressful process, and you've got to find a way to salvage yourself, I think personally first, your own sanity, and then salvage as much of everything else you can for the other people involved. No one decides to go broke. They want to make profit, but they're not quite sure when to pull the pin, and that's the problem. The other common thing, and you see a lot of bankruptcies called by IRD, is they use the tax money they've put away to carry on paying staff wages, and that catches up to them. And normally that's IRD is the biggest closer of businesses in New Zealand, and it's because the money's been used to pay the staff. That's the dominant issue. So it looks really honourable on paper, but from an IRD perspective, it's a fatal move.
Got it. All right. Well, good for you. I think it's an honourable approach to pay back your creditors in that regard, and it's certainly a learning experience. How do you think that an experience like that and building back from a circumstance like that adds credibility to your candidacy for the council?
I've got no idea. You're the first person that raised it. I guess it's common knowledge if you look my name up. I've been relying on my strength of personality and intelligence till now, and I just keep moving forward. If people want to take the position of not voting for me because of that blemish, then that's fine. I can live with that. But I think in many ways it strengthens me. I have a far bigger empathy for business people. I see business people. I go in and you know what? You look for signs, Simon, and you can see businesses that are struggling, and you stop and you talk and you go back and buy more coffee or more cake because you just know that they are struggling. In a way, I wish there was some sort of group that you could foster them around, but there is nothing like that. So who knows?
Lester, I didn't mean to suggest that it's a blemish. What I meant to suggest is that it's actually a significant advantage because it's a life experience that none of these bureaucrats have ever had encountered or even considered as something they might need to deal with. Because when you have all of these people with these billion-dollar budgets at the Auckland Council, it's someone else's ratepayers' money they don't care about. They have no absolute skin in the game. And the point I'd like to make to you is that I think that having someone who knows precisely what the consequences are of going under is a significant skill set. Just like having a lawyer on that governance board or the accountant or the IT guy, that sort of stuff. I think that sort of business experience is something that is invaluable. And that more, goodness, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, I wish more bureaucrats went bankrupt.
Yeah, and point of question too, with Auckland Central City changes, how many businesses have gone broke or on the steps of going broke because of it? And there is no heart of counsel for those people. They give the performative compassion statements about, we hope to help them. So there's no real feeling of empathy for those guys, not at all.
No, there's not at all. All right, now turning to the chat. Sorry, guys, that I haven't got to it for a little while. Socialite says block voting happens around the country. That's very true. And they're definitely pushing a woke identitarian agenda. I'm going to get Lester's view on that shortly. Councillors should be governors demanding accountability and demanding a policy compliance. I thoroughly concur. Reward council staff for improving efficiency, reducing costs, and doing more with less. Does anyone remember the series Yes Minister and I think it was the Department of Government Efficiency? Those sorts of initiatives very seldom seem to succeed in the public sector. Carl Starr on YouTube says, government, one of the biggest employers, turns on Soviet music station. Exactly. PLJ makes a good point. Doge, the councils, etc. PLJ, I absolutely agree. I think that we need a local government and a national government to go through the bureaucracy with a scythe and get rid of a whole bunch of the people that are no longer necessary. In my particular field, I work in my area of expertise. Not expertise. My profession is in an esoteric area of technology called enterprise architecture. Now, Auckland Council, for many years, I haven't dealt with them for a while, but for many years, they had two architecture teams. And I talked to them. I said, well, what's the story? What's the demarcation between these two teams? And there wasn't one. What there was two groups of extremely highly paid professionals who did the same job. It was just a complete and utter double up of work. And as far as I know, that probably still exists. Shelley says, should try X2, Lester. A lot of us don't use Facebook. That's a very, very good point, Shelley the Kiwi. And I did suggest that to Lester earlier the day, that X is the center of gravity, and he has started.
Tonight I tried.
You tried. Good for you. All right. Well, there are a lot of people who still use Facebook. There's a whole bunch of people, particularly those older in life, who do use it. DK Spiracy says, I got to be careful about how I word things. It always gets twisted. Socialism leads to communism. National socialism leads to a country thriving. Okay. I don't know that many Germans in 1946 would have concurred with that perspective. Matuakahu Rangi is here. I don't use Facebook. I do, however, have a fake account mainly for stalking and finding info on community groups. Well, that's a little bit disconcerting. Who else did an all-nighter watching Unite the Kingdom? We'll have some more about that later. Dagsy says he watched it until 4 a.m. Good for you. Socialite says marriage breaking up due to job loss indicates to me that the relationship wasn't exactly healthy. Socialite, maybe that's true, but there's a lot of pressure, man. Like when families are struggling financially, that does tend to manifest in other areas of life, and I feel sorry for anyone in that circumstance. I think it is very, very common. Carl Starr says, but if we pay so much tax, surely the IRD should keep businesses open. As Lester says, Carl, what you're inclined to do is say, okay, well, I owe IRD this money in 6 months, but I got a whole bunch of staff that need to feed their families. So I'm going to take the money that it should be going to the IRD in 6 months, paying the staff now, seeing if it gets me over the hump. It doesn't. IRD always gets their money. They are the ones that drive businesses to the wall because taxation is one of the truisms of life. Excalibur says, it was a huge buzz down there yesterday, meaning the demonstration in London. So much fun. Great crowd of people. Excalibur, I want to have a talk to you about that later in the show. Shelley says, I thought it was cool you were there. At least I can say I had a mate there. PLJ says, I like to refer those businesses who I know as genuine. I do too, PLJ. You get a business, one that you can trust. It's run by a mate, someone who's done you well in the past. You do tend to do business with them. All right, Lester, what do you reckon? What do you reckon about fixing Auckland? We've got this new train station that is going everywhere. We've got a council that is keen to celebrate opening this new extension to the inner city rail loop. Their number one priority is not, of course, this $1 billion train and making sure that it is, running reliably and that people use it, all of that. Their number one priority is changing the name of Britomart Station to something in Maori. How much is that costing us? Should that be a priority? Why are they doing this rather than something that actually adds value to the community?
Let me go off piste a bit with this. What we've actually got going in Auckland is a project that was started probably 20 years too late. And as it opens, we're going to have a depopulated Auckland. I think around 30% of apartments are empty. And if you go down Queen Street, you'll see an awful lot of retail empty. So there's no one going there to work. On top of that, when you look in the buildings above the stories above Queen Street, you barely see lights on every floor. Like some buildings 17 stories high, you'll see 2 floors of lights. That's 15 floors with no office tenants. So what we've got is an Auckland that's now dysfunctional and depopulated, and we've got a new rail system that's supposed to make it easy for everyone to move around and actually entice more business there. But there's no reason for people to be there. Employees aren't going to be there because the businesses aren't there, and the businesses aren't there because there's no money to be made in central Auckland. It's become a bit of a disgrace. So in the first few months of the City Rail being opened up, I think you'll see the novelty factor where people get on and go round and round. But once they've satisfied that appetite and reinvigorated their hate for Auckland City because it's now a very ugly city on the inside, they'll go back to their other cities, their other suburbs, and we'll be left with the rail, another white elephant, another Tahuia, the train that comes from Hamilton to Auckland, which is just absent of people. So what Auckland Central needs is a revitalisation. And why? Actually, can I go on to why I think that why we are in a position where we need to do this, Simon?
Oh, you can, and I think you're probably going to talk about the unitary plan. Is that
No, I'm not. I think people are missing a very clear problem with Auckland. Auckland was started as a city when we depopulated from the rural, from the country into the cities, and we got a lot of manufacturing jobs, and then we got a lot of service sector jobs and a bit of tourism. Well, what's happened in the last 25 years? The manufacturing jobs have disappeared to China, and we're not getting them back. So we've lost mass employment, and we're only left with service, a bit of tertiary education, and a bit of tourism. And Auckland's now starting to suffer from a depopulation because of that effect. So we need another leg on the stool to balance it out. We need three legs on the stool. We can't survive with two. So unless someone creates a new form of industry for Auckland, then there is nothing we can do to stop the demise of Auckland.
okay? Well, I do agree with you that the train is infrastructure for the past, right? Like things changed in COVID. One of the biggest problems is that we had Ardern and Swarbrick bust in huge numbers of homeless people into Auckland at the start of COVID and put them into the hotels. The local police tell me that crime went through the roof. There was a 500% increase in violent crime in Auckland CBD within a 2-month period. Those decisions were made. You also have the restructuring of of Central Auckland, the anti-car philosophy that has been pursued relentlessly, which has also driven out businesses to the point now that people have no need to come into the city. But it's not just the CBD. The same is also true of Newmarket. 6 years ago, Newmarket was the most expensive retail rental space in the country. And now, of course, it is nothing but empty shops. An aspect of it also, too, is that culturally we have changed. As so much of the world has turned towards more service-based industries, the simple fact of the matter is that once upon a time, even if you were someone like me working in technology where, strictly speaking, it isn't necessary for me to be in personal contact with the people I'm working for. It's not like we're on a production line and I do one job and then the next person in the line does their job. Even though that is the case, I would still go into the office 5 days a week. That is no longer the case. In my profession, when I've been employing other architects and other technology people, it is a struggle to get any of them to commit to coming into the office 3 days a week. Most of them consider 3 days a week in the office to be exceptional. What they're always looking for is for 2 days a week. And this is across the board. It doesn't seem to matter in white collar roles, whether it's accountancy, finance, legal, whatever. People are much more after COVID inclined culturally to work from home. And this has a huge impact upon Auckland, which, let's face it, is the engine room of the New Zealand economy in terms of business, in terms of service. And that used to be centred in places like the Viaduct and the CBD and in Newmarket. And the world has changed and it's not like that anymore. So there's a whole bunch of pressures. There's the cultural pressures. There's the anti-car, pro-pedestrian, climate change ideology that council has pursued relentlessly. And then, of course, there's the crime and violence that we've got in the city. So these are all huge, huge challenges, and they're challenges that are extremely well known. But I'm not hearing anything from the council about rectifying any of it.
I think the country is absent of ideas, and I'm looking to people like Stephen Joyce for new creative ideas. Truly, we need another arm to the New Zealand economy, not just agriculture and not just the bit of service we've got left. We have to find something soon. Personally, I think the answer lies in changing the stock market. The stock market is too onerous and it doesn't invigorate new ideas at all. It's just an obstacle to it. So we've got to find a way to get entrepreneurial money to go down to a lower level to generate the new idea, to foster the new ideas that create the employment and to have the money rotating within that local economy. We've got to do it. Because if we don't do that, all we're left with is agriculture, a few people with it, and a whole lot of wealth tax to try and balance out the country. That's where we're headed.
All right, turning to the comments, Socialite says even Marbeck's and Lower Queen Street are closing their retail store. That is absolutely right, Socialite. I think those guys have been going for something like 80 years. They're like one of the oldest record companies in the world, for goodness sake, and they are going to the wall. DK Spiracy says, it's only the rich Maori and the poorest we need to fear. The rich steal, the poor steal. Well, I think that's probably true despite ethnicity. Shelley says, do you see the new trams in China? They work off the special paint on the road. No tracks. Just amazing. Well, Shelley, that's, as Lester says, that is where innovation is occurring, right? In countries like China. We are not seeing that in countries like New Zealand. And when it does occur, what happens is those companies, they have a bright idea, they do pretty well in New Zealand, and then before you know it, it's offshore, right? Like, we talk about New Zealand having a space launch capacity. No, we don't. That company was broadly supported financially by grants from the government. The first thing they did is move their head office to California and register as an American company. Similarly with GlaxoSmithKline. GlaxoSmithKline is, I think, the third largest pharmaceutical company in the world. Its head office is in London. Do you happen to know, Lester, where GlaxoSmithKline comes from?
I don't.
Bunnythorpe. It's one of the largest companies in the world. It was founded in Bunnythorpe and their head office is still there. It is now a mechanic shop. How much of NZ won't mind too much if Auckland downsizes? Socialite, that's probably fair. I think that there would be a few who wouldn't care too much. Auckland Council, says Shelley, has approved the initial phase of a plan aimed at enabling the construction of 2 million new homes in the city over coming decades, marking a significant shift in urban development. That is exactly right. Are they expecting some visitors? Well, this is it. Like, when you look at what is happening in terms of immigration, right? That it is very much the case that in terms of growing GDP, adding immigrant populations is the low-hanging fruit. It's a very, very easy win for national governments. And with Cindy Boy Luxon, but it doesn't work.
It doesn't. Christchurch was a really good example of we had Filipinos, South Africans, UK, whatever. As soon as the earthquakes hit, they were people sending money back to their countries, by the way. As soon as the earthquake hit, guess who was gone first? They're not permanent. They're on temporary work visas and only a few ever go for permanent residency. It's a total waste of time. And by the way, we're letting in 284 temporary work visa people per day at the moment.
Wow. Yeah, and I agree with you. It's only a short-term sugar fix. Socialite says Kawakawa Bay, south of Clevedon, is lovely. Good to know. DK Spiracy says, what about the others our country is being flooded with? Yeah, well, this is it, right? Like a lot of the immigration is very much targeting unskilled parts of the world. And particularly from societies who don't necessarily share our cultural values. How many consultants needed for that? Well, as a consultant myself, Shelley, I say more consultants. The world needs more consultants. Our2 is here. Good evening, young man. The coming AI revolution is going to make many, many more current jobs obsolete. You're absolutely right, Our2. It's just going to have a huge impact absolutely across the board. And when it's going to really start to bite is in those white collar jobs. Embrace Empathy says 2 million homes in Auckland. What the heck? Who's going to go into them? Man, I so don't want to go down the immigration surge, the ones that bring hate, etc. All right, guys. Well, do think in the comments. I'm always very interested in your background for it, but do use the opportunity in the comments to get to know Lester Bryant here, right? This man is standing as a candidate for us here in Auckland, and it would be very good to hear what he has to say in terms of policy about what he's going to offer when he becomes one of our councillors. All right, Lester, I do have, speaking about it, I do have some bits and pieces of materials here. This arrived in my mailbox the other day, which is the Citizens and Rate Players. Their sort of alliance. These are kind of like the National Party aligned candidates, right? And what a whole bunch of people like me do is we never know too much about who is standing for council. CNR, it's kind of like the we know they're the right wing, the vision, whatever it is, that is all the Labour and Green Party people. Don't vote for them, right? So that's kind of as far as the sort of the thought process goes. So when it comes to an independent, it really is, I think, the equation for you is to try and to get your name out there and, gain some traction in the electorate. Would that be a fair assessment of what your approach to the next couple of weeks of campaigning is?
I've developed my own plan for what I'll do to counter it. However, if you look at council's makeup, there's a lot of independents there. So I'm not convinced that those united groups have as bigger say or sway. They certainly have more control over the public meetings. That's obvious. I've also wondered, what do people really vote on? Do they look at your profile? Do they look at your website? I would say the discerning ones do. Maybe 5 to 10% of the voting group, but I suspect the majority, and I'm being very glib here, I don't know the answer, but I think they look at the photo and they go, I like the look of that person. That's what I think is happening. Yeah. It's a beauty contest, seriously, because you look at some of the ones that are in council, they are obviously there from a beauty, certainly not from what they've got to say. It's a beauty contest. That's it.
All right, guys, everyone watching Simon TV, you heard it here first. Lester said that if I stand for election, I should put a paper bag over my head. Socialite asks, Lester, what are your views on the policies of New Zealand First? That's a good question.
Overall, I like them. I particularly like Winston and Shane. They talk very old school values. And I think Winston's latest economic one, I'm trying to think what it was. I thought, no, there's a problem there. That won't work. I'm not sure he's so great at economics, but they want the country to succeed. They have an ambition to make it succeed. They will remove obstacles to make it succeed. And contrary to that, you've got the Greens who only want to put obstacles in the front of everything. They want no ease of path to any transition other than themselves getting into Parliament. So New Zealand First has my backing. I like them. By the way, I like ACT as well for the same reason.
Good for you. Good for you. All right. Michael, the chairman of the Rock the Vote party is here in the chat, who says, great to see you live, Lester, on the wonderful Simon TV. Cheers, Michael from Rock the Vote NZ. Good to see you, Michael. Wonderful. And I'm looking forward to hopefully catching up with you this week. And thank you very much, young man, for the introduction to Lester. It's been wonderful to have him on. Matua Kahurangi says, I don't think Wayne Brown could win a beauty contest. Well, that is very, very true. That's very true. I'm totally going to tell him you said that. Crunkster says, does Lester believe in man-made climate change and his views of the economic impacts of chasing these impossible targets? That's a fantastic question, Crunkster. I'm going to let Lester answer that, and then I'm going to get into another topic that he and I wanted to talk about, which is energy policy. So go for it, Lester. What do you think about climate change?
Right. Let me give a bit of background, which is going to help the energy side as well. So around about the 10th century, the population in Europe doubled, and it was because someone invented the plough. About 1860 to 1880, we had the advent of industrialisation using oil products, and oil suddenly found a use, whereas before it had no use. And what's happened since we started using oil is we have now got 8 times the population. So oil has been responsible not only for the development of the Western world, but the development of our longevity and quality of our lifestyle. Without oil, we'd be doomed. For one simple number, every calorie of food in the supermarket has about 10 calories of oil that went into making it, from the harvesting, sowing, refrigeration, packaging, everything. So without oil, we would have a starving world in a nutshell. We've used oil, and maybe it is coincidental or maybe it's not, that the planet is now warming up, and it is. And I'll give you a hard fact on that. Last year, the world's oceans increased by 13.5 zetajoule of heat or energy. That's like having a part of the sun in the sea heating it up. And all man-made energy use last year was half a zetajoule. So I'm saying 1/2 for all man-made use versus 13.5 increase in the oceans. And that's a very accurate figure to measure how much the oceans warmed up by on average. So we know the planet is warming. That's an absolute. Whether it's anthropogenic or not, you could debate that. But it really now comes down to what the hell can we do with that kind of distortion? Can we really do anything to solve that? It's highly doubtful. So my view on it is, don't bloody try. Right now, we should be saying to our children, live it up while you got the chance. We don't know what happens next, but it's obviously out of control.
Okay, that's a good answer. All right. Matua Kahurangi observes, we liked ACT and NZF supporters around these ways. Very true. Socialite says, I've been asking candidates a list of 10 specific questions that include employment history, tertiary qualifications, intentions if elected, how they intend to cut costs and save money, and what their spending plans are. I think, Socialite, those are probably interesting questions. If you want to lodge them into the chat, I will certainly hit them up for Lester to address. PLJ says local BPYS elections, like government elections, need either MSM support and toil or a dynamic social media campaign. I think that's probably right, PLJ. I think that, you really do need to get out and about there, and I think you do need to have a pretty good social media presence. Embrace Empathy says, don't you know men with beards win all the ladies' competitions these days? All right. One of the areas that you sent me in the correspondence before you came on the show was talking about things like energy availability, and this is an issue that is close to my heart. You and I both have a bit of it, and certainly yours is more significant than mine, but a professional experience inside the energy sector. You said to me that we are looking at shortages, and that this is something that people aren't talking about. We're not hearing anything about addressing it. What is your view of what is happening energy-wise nationwide? Now, I ask this knowing this isn't specifically an Auckland Council question. It's much more a broader sort of national issue, but it'd be really good to get your insights into what is happening here.
Okay, this is the crisis issue that's going to cause significant embarrassment for New Zealand. We are about to hit an energy famine in the North Island, and it will happen next year. The principal reason is this. We've had 45, 50 years of Maui gas field, the gas coming from it. And in the recent years, even though it's diminished a bit, it's been supplying around about 28 petajoules of our energy. And Pauakura, which is the second biggest oil field, has been producing, I think, around about 13. Now, Maui, the owners of Maui, OMV, have publicly stated absolutely clearly they're shutting it down next year. There's no more gas. It's finished. It's now costing them more to get the little bits of gas out of it than it is to carry on producing it. That leaves us with a national shortfall of over 50, 60 petajoules of energy a year in a market where we only use 150. So we're losing over a third of our gas. And that gas isn't only used for heating boilers, hot water, things like that. It's actually used for electricity generation. Around about 56% of our peak electricity comes from gas burning. So we're going to have an electricity shortage and a gross gas shortage next year, and there is nothing, I mean nothing we can do about it. So we're going to have a country where we're going to have to triage the situation, decide who gets what. Is it the hospitals? Is it the universities? Is it the schools? Is it the hotels?
Is it Methanex?
Well, definitely. Methanex has rights to gas. They have contracts. They will sell those rights. I think they've been selling it to the government at $55 a kilojoule hour, where they've been paying $24. So it was more profitable for them to sell it than it was to actually use the gas. And they'll do that again. But that means for us energy at 2, 3, 4 times the cost. So that's even to retain that gas usage. The other big thing that's going to affect us over the next couple of years is now that Maui's gone, all the other gas fields, which are so small in comparison, will bleed out quicker. So this isn't an issue. This is a sinking lid issue. This is an issue that starts with a very big hit and doesn't finish until it hits the bottom. And it might only be a matter of years.
Okay. I have heard Shane Jones over the last week or two talking about importing huge amounts of LPG, parking it off the coast in the Taranaki, and using that to ameliorate the shortfall. Have you heard about that?
4 to 5 years to even part achieve that.
4 to 5 years. So, okay, correct. What are the challenges in that plan?
Okay, so there's the biggest challenge is this. LNG is under very high pressure and almost cryogenic. So you've liquefied a gas that likes to be, I think, 130, LNG, it's about minus 88 degrees, if I remember right. So you compress it to get it as a liquid. When it arrives here in liquid form, as soon as you decompress it, it becomes a refrigerant. So it freezes everything. So you have to have masses of heating, not cooling. They look like cooling towers, but you have to have masses of heating to get the gas not to freeze in the pipes and go into the existing Maui gas pipeline. That infrastructure has to be built. We don't have it. The only other option we have is we create an offshore dock where we bring in the LNG and we bring in the 1 or 2 ships that can do that processing. But I don't think there's a spare processing plant in the world, a ship. From what I've heard, they're just unavailable. You'd have to go to Korea and ask them to build one after you've just cancelled the ferries from them. So we're in a
So, all right.
it's an utter cluster. I kid you not. People
All right,
who
well,
understand the industry are sitting there going, "What the hell?"
Yeah, well, you certainly are a ray of sunshine. It's got. Does it not surprise you that this is not more of an issue? You know, that we're not hearing an awful lot of public discourse about this, about things like running out of essential energy supplies, of having to make some pretty difficult choices, as you said, around who gets the gas and who doesn't. Is it little old ladies in rest homes? Is it children in school? Is it sick people in hospitals? Is it farmers looking to synthesize ammonia? Some of those hard choices are really, really significant. And the economic damage of making those choices is absolutely huge. Don't you think that this should be more of an issue in our public discourse?
I can't believe it's not. And if you look back in the media, this has been warned about since 2009 and warned about often in the last 2 to 3 years. Certainly, what killed the message really was Jacinda and the Greens destroying any exploration programs in 2019. So no one wanted to listen to the messenger. And now I think it's too late. And that national, and I suspect Shane Jones, know how bad it is, but they're going, oh my God, how do we get through to next year? Can we get elected before it's an issue? They're clutching at straws. They don't know. They've got no idea.
I think that's a fair assessment. And, I think that the economic sabotage of that gas exploration ban, I think that is just, that is beyond treasonable. And I can't believe that on that alone, there haven't been criminal investigations. All right, turning to the chat. PLJ says, Leicester gets science. He certainly does. Misha is here on YouTube. Ever heard that Europe is building fusion power plants? No, I hadn't heard that. Carl Starr says, can soy products fix the energy issue? Asking for the Greens. Well, that's pretty funny. But interesting you mentioned that, Carl Starr. For those who don't know, my family has a very, very off-grid property, and, everything has to be, there's no utilities whatsoever, so we have to do our own water supply, energy supply, telecommunications, all that sort of stuff, which has been largely been solar, but we have the potential for doing things like micro hydro. One of the things that I also looked at and actually bought the bits and pieces to do was creating ethanol as a fuel additive. So when you are talking, where is your comment there, talking about soy products, the product that I actually looked at was lucerne, right? Alfalfa. Lucerne is a crop in New Zealand that you can grow, that you can ferment and distill, and then there's a couple of other steps to the process, but you can actually produce your own ethanol. Of course, the very best product for doing that is not soy. It is hemp. But getting a license to grow that is almost impossible. Debbie Lacey is here. Good evening, Ms. Lacey. Amazon, I believe, is not happening, talking about the data centers. The people are really focused on those data centers, right? Like in terms of their energy consumption, that is massive. But what is often overlooked is their water consumption. Those hyperscale data centers use water for cooling like you would not believe. Debbie, I haven't heard about Amazon cancelling those data center projects or any of the other hyperscale people investing in New Zealand, but I am not at all surprised to see that many of them are slow pedaling them. I think that energy consumption is the massive issue there. Dagsy says, Lester, is it worth reopening Marsden Point? That's a good question.
I think you're mistaken. Marsden Point was an oil refinery. It was never a generator. So the idea was you bring in oil and you refine it there for New Zealand distribution and use. What we've got is a lack of energy. Without gas, which we've become highly dependent on, I would say for the North Island, probably 60-70% of our energy needs comes from gas. We're in a dire position. And by the way, Maui gas field, to replace it with Huntly using coal, you'd need 29 Huntleys. So it gives you an idea of how much energy was coming out of Maui.
Okay. Our tour is here. Good evening, young man. Micronuclear plants in 40-foot containers, a la Rolls-Royce current designs. What have you looked at those, Lester?
Yeah, nothing's commercially available, and it won't be for a long time. And we'd be one of the last countries to get it, even if we wanted to buy it. We need an immediate solution. Our biggest issue is from next year until we have a solution, which is 4 to 5 years away. So what do we do in the meantime? And there is, I'll give you another figure. You'd need 53,000 acres of wind farm to replace Huntly. How's that? It's by the way, I call renewables unreliables.
Yeah, right? Well, that's
because that's what
right,
they are. And they're parasitic, because without the constant gas or coal-fired, they wouldn't look good. They only look good because you got the base load equipment somewhere else. So if we went pure green, no, we'd be doomed.
Okay. All right. Don't let me near ethanol, says Matua. I'll drink it. Yeah, don't drink ethanol. It's not good for you. That that thing about drinking ethanol going blind, that is actually true. That is not an old wives' tale. If you drink ethanol, you are going blind. That happens. DK Sprucey says, "Hey Simon, where can I get in touch with you? I'm pretty easy to find. You can find me on SimonTV.org, but most people interact with me on X, where my username is Simon R. Anderson." Excalibur says 29 Huntleys. Good Lord, I absolutely agree. Misha says solution: buy Russian gas. Yeah, I hear it's going pretty cheap, Misha, these days from the Indians. Okay. All right. Well, we've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes. What I thought I'd do, I thought perhaps we could end. You can give us a little bit of a spiel about why you think that people here in Auckland should vote for you. But I also thought that we'd take a little bit of a break after that. And I might get you to hang around, and I'll get your perspective on some of the news articles that I want to bring up for the rest of the show, if you've got the time and inclination. Would that suit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, look, let me give you a couple of minutes, and you can just tell us why you think it is the case that here in Auckland we should be voting for Lester Bryant.
Primary difference, well, there's a point of difference about me. I'm a guy who understands numbers. I'm a quantity surveyor, and I know how to price projects. I've priced many projects. I've been involved in hospitals, a bit of Scott Base. I've helped people with motorways, gas stations, a hell of a lot of residential, and they all go together in the same way. And by that, I mean there's a methodology to understanding what true costs are. It's called cost engineering. Quantity surveyors are essentially cost engineers. And if you know how to assemble cost, you know what the end price will be of something. A bad illustration would be, say, Transmission Gully in Wellington, which had an initial budget of $850 million and has been sold to the Labour government for $3.25 billion. Right? That's what this country's ending up paying for an $850 million motorway. And it's ridiculous. And no one has the skill level to scrutinise or question what's going on. I bring in a new skill level, an analytical level. And that's what I really want to apply. I also like fixing things. It's just something I do. Probably something me and Wayne Brown do have in common. We see things, we go, that could be better. And I like to argue. I don't know if that's obvious because Simon hasn't raised any arguments, but I do because I want to know the truth. One of my favourite sayings is the truth at any cost lowers all other costs. And every project I've ever been involved with, it's the truth that matters the most. So why would you vote for me? Because I'm a numbers man. That's it. If you want social policy, soft policy, all that, I can comment on it, but that's not me. My intent is to get control of the numbers and to drive the numbers down. And I truly believe that we do not need to spend any more, particularly in Auckland, because the city is not increasing in population, certainly permanent population, it is decreasing. So why the hell are we doing these mega projects? No more rates rises. Cut them out. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Well, I got to tell you, Mr. Bryant, that was pretty compelling. And having had a chat to you, having listened to you speak this evening, I'm pretty convinced that I'm going to have to give you my vote, despite my willingness to try to appear neutral. But I'm not going to decide until the day. All right, now I'm looking forward to receiving your flyer. And seeing the rest of your campaign in the sort of the final 2 weeks I think we're in now. If people wanted to meet you in person, if they wanted to review your policies and interact with you, where is the best place for them to go?
I'm sorry that I don't have a broader spectrum than Instagram and Facebook. In the first instance, get either yourself or get someone to look at Facebook. All my contact details are there. You can interact with me, and I'd love to. I seriously would.
That's tremendous. And are you doing any live appearances?
Yeah, I do. The next one is Tuesday at the university in front of the Sustainability Council. Yay. So I'm going to be there battling against the Greens and the Wokes, and that's going to be interesting. If you want to go, I'll certainly keep you entertained. So. Okay,
fantastic. So you have a debate that you're attending on Tuesday night at Auckland University.
Correct. And they have, keep in mind, they're a special interest group. They are not there to foster my ideas, but I'm kind of prepared for that. So.
Okay. All right. Well, look, we'll put a link up to your Instagram and to your Facebook in the chat. Guys, I think we're going to take a little bit of a break. I've been Lester and I have been speaking for an hour and 50 minutes. He's kindly agreed that he's going to hang around and give me some comment on some of the articles that I have lined up for the rest of the show. Why don't you give us just a couple of minutes? I'm going to play a little bit of music, play you a little bit of cinema. I think I've got some Laurel and Hardy to play you tonight. So we might do that while we're jacking up the rest of the show. Guys, believe it or not, you are watching Simon TV.